Good evening, everybody, and uneducated economist here. So, in today's live stream or tonight's live stream, I'd like to talk a little bit about the domestic manufacturing here in the United States now becoming obviously unsustainable, that it's not going to last, and that it's going to move overseas, and that the foreign production is going to find its way in. I left a couple of articles down in the description, one of them to talking about how John Deere is moving some of its manufacturing into Mexico. And this is not a surprise. A lot of places are moving their manufacturing to Mexico. And this is pretty obvious that the United States or the corporations within the United States is also going to take advantage of that operation as well, moving, to a less cost inhibitive place, where labor's cheaper, energy might be cheaper, all the stuff is just cheaper to manufacture, and that's what we're going to end up moving to. And that's for any corporation anywhere in the world, no matter what it is. It's not just here in the United States, but you can say that for anybody. Now, it's pretty obvious when it comes to agriculture, the United States is a manufacturing powerhouse. They always have been. But now that's starting to come to a change, and corn, like the epitome of agriculture when it comes to like something that is grown here in the United States, it's used for food, like animal feed for like raising cattle. It's used for fuel, for everything. Like corn is a major crop here in the United States, and we produce a lot of corn, but we don't produce as much as Brazil does now. So it's pretty interesting to watch how this battle plays out, as it's pretty obvious when it comes to the Cantillon effect. You can see that the cheaper place to produce corn is Brazil. However, if you're aware of how the Cantillon effect works, you're going to know it's something to do with transportation and distribution, and how the United States has by far the most well-established distribution network when it comes to agricultural products and getting those grains from the field to the ships and to the world. We do it better than just about anybody. And Brazil, although is not as good at it, they are getting better, and that's the difference, is that they are now starting to get to the point, they are now building up that infrastructure to the point that they are competing on a scale that the United States will no longer be able to. See, we already have the most efficient distribution system we can. Whatever cost that is going to come into making the crops cheaper is going to be production, and Brazil is already producing. There's nothing we can do. Our cost to going into production is too high. And when Brazil makes their distribution cheaper, more efficient, they're going to compete in a way that then puts us in second place, and eventually other people will find their way in as well. And it's obvious when you follow the Cantillon effect what is happening here. It's not like a surprise. People want to put blame, and they'll throw, all kinds of issues out there saying this is the reason and that's the reason. And that's cool because this probably makes a lot of sense, and there's not like any way that you can really argue the facts of it. But ultimately, this is an economic force that is at play, and Cantillon describes it from hundreds of years ago. So just simply knowing that there is a process to what is happening here, as the standard of living, as the cost of manufacturing, as the ever increasing amounts of foreign production comes into this country and is now occurring here, you're going to find that the domestic manufacturers just go find a better place, cheaper place, more efficient place to work from. And that's what's taken place. It's not necessarily a political issue, although you can blame politics. However, if you were to try and consider what it was that needed to be done in order to prevent this outcome, it would have taken a very socialistic position of which that no, you cannot produce anymore. No, you're not going to increase your standard of living. No, you're not going to move into luxuries. No, we're not going to bring in foreign production. No, you're not going to be in a free market. Now, that would have fixed the system. I don't know if that's fixing the system, but apparently that's what some people probably would have appreciated if they didn't want what's occurring today, because that's what it would have taken, right? Did I say would have? Anyway. So what we have now is a victim of circumstances in which that the production, the powerhouse production of the United States that produced the world's greatest services is now coming to an end. And this is it. You can see it taking place with Brazil now producing more corn than the United States, which was like unheard of just a few years ago. And you're watching continuous manufacturers leaving the United States, even though they go through all this effort to try and retain efforts like solar panel production and stuff like that, which is just, I mean, kind of lame when you think about like how much solar production or solar panel production is being done within China, flooding the world with all kinds of stuff, not just solar panels, but everything under the sun. Anyway, wanted to come out and share that with you. Had a live stream error earlier today, malfunction, as the internet service that I was using was failing on me, not to mention the phone overheated in the 90 something degree weather that we were facing here, which nobody in the Pacific Northwest is used to dealing with. So anyway, thought I'd come out and share a little bit of thoughts with you when it came to the production here in the United States and what we can expect going into the future, which I would imagine is just going to be more of the same no matter what you do. There's no way that you're going to be manufacturing cheaper, more competitively than any other nation out there. So what we can expect if we do, have any idea of retaining manufacturing here is going to be a lot of tariffs and subsidies and effort coming from the government, which means, a lot of spending or tax upon the people themselves, whether it comes from a direct tax of the government or it comes from just taxing with higher prices due to the increased prices through tariffs. So not allowing the cheap foreign production to come in is the government's way of trying to prevent the inevitable outcome of failure to produce for ourselves, which is, what's happening right now. All right. You guys have any questions? You got any comments? Thank you for joining in. We got 100 people within the live stream tonight. Thank you so much for joining in. All right. If you're above the 47th, it stays light longer. I'm in the Central California. It just got dark here. Yeah, I love how people love it, how it's just like, because it'll be light till about 10 o'clock, I guess. Yeah. Hello, UE, big fan. I appreciate your take on everything because it challenges me to think for myself. Keep up the great work, sir. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being here tonight. 90 degrees, welcome to my world. It's Texas, brother. No, like, Oregon's not used to anything above, like, 80. Like, 80 is about the limit, All right. I mean, especially the Pacific Northwest corner of Oregon, All right, the earth is flat. Okay. I stood on Mauna Kea one time. You know what Mauna Kea is? Mauna Kea is a big giant volcano in Hawaii, right? And it has a bunch of observatories up there, right? So you can look at the space, you can look at all the planets and stars and stuff. And we went on the stargazing tour where we drove up there. And Mauna Kea is like, it's huge, right? I mean, it's way up. There's snow, right? There's snow up there. It's pretty funny to think like, yeah, we went to Hawaii and actually threw a snowball. But what was really interesting is that when you stand on Mauna Kea, not only can you not like get your breath because there's like so little oxygen up there, you can't like get a deep breath. But something is cool about the horizon because it was really clear the day that we were up there, and you can actually see the curvature of the earth, right? Like you can see it. It's like you can see it bend, and now people might say, no, that's just the disc you're looking at, or it's concave or whatever. I'm like, I don't know, right? It looks pretty damn round from up there to me, right? And now what do I know, right? I mean, it was just like, I ain't no scientist, I ain't nothing, but I've had other people try to tell me that the earth is flat, and the guy who was trying to tell me the earth is flat was on an aircraft carrier. And I'm thinking, bro, you sailed around the world, man. You can't tell me the earth is flat, And I'm like, okay, well, between the just being up there on Mauna Kea and looking at the curvature of the earth and just kind of like what I'm assuming to be just a logical sense, the earth is round, right? It's a ball. Yeah, I'm full of useless information. 8 inches square per mile. All right. It's a bummer. We're losing great jobs for the middle class. It is, Christopher. It is a bummer, but think about it, man. Like now that you understand why, like why these normal jobs, why a job as, I mean, you think about it. If you had a job as a welder and you worked as a welder for 15, 20 years and you were like known as working for a fairly good company as a welder, you probably had an income that could provide enough for a family, right? I mean, even just a few years ago, you could probably do that. And there was places in the country that if you couldn't do it in that area, you could do it in this area, right? Or that, whatever, you can move, right? But it's to the point now that these possibilities aren't even there. So even if you had a middle class job, right, or what would be considered a middle wage job or middle class, you know, earner, I mean, it's not a valid job anymore for what would be considered a reward for that sort of income. Like, the idea of having a single income to provide enough for a household is gone. In fact, having a household is gone. Right? And see, now this isn't something that we can like try and say, oh man, society's, whatever, birth control. Oh, okay, fine. There's a lot of reasons and there's all kinds of stuff like, that you can come into. But Cantillon describes it, right? He says if you have a high standard of living, if your nation has a high standard of living, you will have lesser population. That's all there is to it. And we're experiencing that right now. So as there's less household formation taking place and less really need for any like want or desire to even have the things that you would want in life to have a house, like it doesn't make any sense. Like most of us in my generation, Generation X and earlier, like the idea that you like get a job, kind of figure out your careers, get married, have kids, have the house, all that stuff was still very prevalent. Like what else are you gonna do? Like you never had any other plan other than that. That was like the ultimate plan. And whether or not you succeeded in doing that plan, everybody was attempting to do something of that nature, right? And it wasn't like everybody was moving towards that or having family and, doing all that. Some people weren't interested in any of that stuff. But still, like the overall game plan was something very similar. It was, ultimately have a house and be around family or whatever, right? I mean, that's like, live life. But I see now that that's not necessarily the case. Like just independent living, being who you are, like not having like any kind of like commitment to any individual person or anything like that is a very common trait. Although many people probably wish they did have a commitment to an individual person out there, they don't do it, right? It's just not common. And so a lot of that has to do probably again with the economic events that are taking place that is causing that to happen. I mean, ultimately, if you think about it, it really comes down to an issue with it comes down to an issue of limitation. Like if there was not an abundance of resources, if there was not an abundance of capabilities or possibilities, if there wasn't this abundant out there, then there would be a limitation and people would have to work very hard, right? And because people don't really have to work that hard for anything, right? And it's surprising, like to even say that considering how hard I feel I work towards stuff. But even really, you think about it, like you don't have to really work that hard. I, we bought a set of like I don't know where Sarah got it from. Sarah loves Little House on the Prairie, so she's been watching the episodes as she bought the series. So she's been watching episodes of Little House on the Prairie, and I think about it, it's just like every single minute or just about every single waking day of Charles Ingalls' life, if it wasn't like headed towards church or something like a food kind of event, like no matter what it was, if it wasn't a particular thing that he was doing, he was working. He was pounding together some wagon wheel. He was putting together something. He was nailing. It was like always working. Like anything you saw him doing, if he was not like in the movement of going somewhere to do something, he was working on something. It was always that way for him. And so I think about like that was pretty much the mindset of the way people used to be, not just a few generations ago. Like, I mean, I can't compare myself to the current generations out there because even my generation has grown very accustomed and was introduced to the internet first. Like a lot of people want to claim like their first introduction to the internet. No, it's Generation X. Like we were the first ones to have the experience with it, to be introduced with it, and we were also the first ones, or not the first ones, but the last ones to use like sticks as toys, right? Like to go outside and don't come back until like the streetlights come on, kind of thing. We ran amok. We were like feral kids, back in the day. We like, used our imaginations and stuff. And it was like the introduction of like video games that started drawing us in. Like when I was 6, 7 years old, there wasn't no video games to go play. Right? Even into 8, I don't think like it was probably, I didn't start playing Nintendo until I was in the 6th grade. Right? So all that time living up, I mean, you would find the Atari. Like Atari was cool. We would mess around with Atari, but after an hour or so, you get bored and go outside. Right? But that was it until Nintendo came out. People weren't really locked inside playing video games that much. It was fun. Good times back in the day. Anyway, 171 people watching. Go hit that like button. We got 56 people watching, or 56 people having hit like that button. 171 people watching. We should definitely have it up to over 100 right now. All right, deja vu. No one claims responsibility. We used to... Where are my glasses? We used rotary phones and had black and white TVs too. Yeah, I still have a black and white TV. I have an old school black and white TV that I won't get rid of because if I ever find Pong at a yard sale or something, I'm gonna hook it up to that old black and white TV and I'm gonna play Pong on this little tiny, and it has a handle, it has a folding handle that you can carry it around, so it's like, easy to move. And I don't know how old this thing is. It's got to be from at least from the 60s. I mean, and it's pretty cool that I still have that thing. Packed it around forever. Some stuff I just can't let things go. And yeah, the rotary phone, I remember. And then if you screwed the number up, you had to start over. It was great. Why so serious all the time? Enjoy the message. Who are you talking to? Me? I don't know. I'm pretty serious, all right. We, all right. We got to turn. We got up to, jeez. We got up to turn channel 2. I wanted to play video games. My father told me, program your own game. You will not get joystick and not a game. And now I got a BSc in ComSci, and I am a developer, born 74. Right on. Sounds like you enjoyed it. All right. Pong will burn the image in that CRT style TV. Great point, Simon. We are same age, and I remember growing up in the 80s. Folks were far less materialistic. Houses were smaller. People only went out to eat on special occasions. Yeah, it was, and that's, I mean, at least for my family, my parents cooked really well, so we always, like, they were really good cooks. And so going out wasn't necessarily something that was very common. And like, I mean, but I wouldn't say that it wasn't like uncommon, I mean, I would say we might have gone out maybe once or twice a month, if that. Um, so, but I think like like just the demeanor of people, especially kids, like when you got up like on Saturday, you knew that you only had a few hours in the morning to watch cartoons and then you were out. Like you were out figuring out what you were going to do for the day. And like for me, like I lived on a retired Air Force base with all kinds of military kids, and so like every single house had kids in it. The place was just packed with people. And so we had all kinds of stuff to do and all kinds of people's, different places to go and houses to hang out at, but nobody would let us ever hang out inside. But there was always kind of things to do. And so, for me, when I think about that, I think about like how it is that we didn't like just because there was VCRs didn't mean we had access to every single movie, right? Like I remember the video store, the video rental place that was on that retired Air Force base literally had like, I don't know, a wall of maybe 100 movies. And that was for the entire base. Like that's where you went down to rent. And so you had your option of just like a handful of movies. And I thought that was pretty funny to look back on, that really there wasn't that many people who had VCRs, so there really wasn't a need to have that many movies, and there really wasn't a need for a facility to actually rent movies from, right? Until everybody ended up with VCRs. Right? And now watching this happen, like I watched like people all of a sudden, like I remember the day we got a VCR. And I remember like dad recording like, ball games and stuff like that. And what's really funny is that like the video game rental industry just exploded. Like everybody like all over had this video game, not video games, but video movies. Just the VHS rental business. Well, it just exploded, and then eventually once, you could just download a movie, all the video rental just disappeared, gone. I bring this up because I think about we have a video rental store here in Astoria. It's called Video Horizons. It's one of the last, I believe, in the nation that actually rents out movies. Like, and we go down there and we will rent movies not only to support the business, but we don't have internet right here right now, right? We're getting it. I mean, they show up, they work on it, they're saying they're getting it for us. It's brand new to our area, so nobody around here has really gotten hooked up with internet yet. I mean, we had dial-up here, but it was terrible, so nobody used it. But like one of the last video rental stores is here in Astoria, and I think about like how iconic that really is, to go in and look for movies that you could possibly watch and rent and take home, and then have to return. And I remember like the whole Be Kind rewind, and it was bad on your VCR to rewind, so you got video cassette rewinders that you would use to rewind your videotapes, and it was just like just a whole different era. Anyway, moving on. Just done dreaming back in the past. All right, we used to rent VCR at video stores and get 5 movies for the weekend. What amazes me is how fat all the people are. Stephen, what's interesting is that my wife noticed it. I hadn't noticed it before, but she was right. And after she had mentioned it, I looked around and I started noticing a lot more. When we went to the Rebel Capitalist event, the people at the Rebel Capitalist who are there, and I'm not saying this for everybody, but generally the audience, everybody who attends this, and really just everybody who's there at the event altogether, are very healthy looking people. Like they look like they eat healthy. They look like they, take care of themselves. And if they don't work out, I mean, at least have some sort of active lifestyle that keeps them fairly fit. Not saying that everybody was that way, but generally speaking, you kind of see that overall generally healthy appearance about most of the people who are there. And so I think about that for, when it comes to like that separation between the rich and the poor, you know, well, most of the people who attend the Rebel Capitalist, I mean, there's not like everybody could afford it, but they're like $800 tickets to get in, right? So you gotta have to have the money to kind of get into the thing. So generally, these are people who are probably going to be more into the investment style, real estate investment, stocks, whatever it is. But just probably not your average dude who's just gonna like, oh, hey, I'll go check that out, see what that's like. They're gonna be probably fairly serious about the whole thing. And therefore, if you're serious about your finance, you're probably serious about yourself and your health and everything that goes with it. And it comes out pretty obvious, right? So you think about it, like the majority of the people don't take care of themselves, right? You can see it out there, whether it's through drug abuse or abuse of their eating disorders or whatever that's happening. They have some sort of issue that's happening that doesn't allow them to really live a nice healthy lifestyle. And part of that is like, living that healthy lifestyle is understanding your finances, right? Because you think about it, if you're comfortable and good with your finances, where it is that you're making money, where it is that you're putting your money towards, taking care of your debts, taking care of your bills, and all that feels very comfortable and natural and not necessarily easy, but comfortable in the sense that you're taking care of business, you're able to do it, and you can see the final outcome of being debt free with a decent retirement or something of that coming to the end. That feeling of like being able to achieve that sort of outcome takes an incredible amount of stress off your life. Like, even though you might be like in a stressful position as far as like having business to deal with, or you know a lot of heavy business decisions, as far as like, you don't understand, I'm a stockbroker who deals with all kinds of, okay, whatever. But if you have an outcome that says, hey man, if I was to lose my income today, would my life end to like this way of life, would it end tomorrow, or could I carry on, right? And now most of the people that I would think that are understanding of their finance, feeling good about it, in that right position, would be able to figure it out, would be like, no, tomorrow is not going to end, right? And that I can carry on tomorrow, and that I have to figure out what it is that I got to do. But that isn't the same thing for somebody who's on the street. Like, they don't have any money at all, right? So if you take everything that they have, which is going to be a few meager possessions, that's it. They're starting over, right? And so that whole day is just screwed for them. And going all the way up the line until you start getting into a financially secure position, no matter where you are, from that homeless person all the way up to just paying your bills, barely making it, and you get the flat tire. And now if you're late one more time, you're fired. Your whole world's going to come undone too, right? And so this is, again, the stressful experience that somebody has, whether they make it to work on time or not. This is the sort of level of experience that they have every single day, living on that edge, right? But again, if you're financially secure, you get a flat on the phone, right? Deal with this. God, what an annoyance. Right? Not the same experience. And that's really where I think, like, how most of the people end up being unhealthy is because most of them don't really understand finance. They don't, or not necessarily they don't understand finance. They haven't taken their personal finance into consideration as probably making that the most healthy thing. And then from that, you will be healthy in nature anyway, just from coming from that. I don't know if those two are necessarily tied together, saying that you have to be rich to be healthy, right? I don't think that's necessarily the consideration, but I think these two would generally go hand in hand. And that if you're taking care of yourself, you'd probably take care of your finances. If you take care of your finances, you'd be taking care of yourself. All right, moving on. I think you would be a great spokesman for that, and I think the videos would garner good reviews. Go get 'em, Yui. Let me see here. I'm slightly younger than you, Simon, but I was definitely there for the video stores. I can't believe how much information the internet has given us. Thank God for the internet. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it every single day, considering what it is that I was able to do with having YouTube and putting out videos and changing my entire life around. Like, I can't believe it. Thank God for the internet. Without it, I don't know where I would be right now. All right. What are we talking about? Weren't we talking about manufacturing here in the United States? All right. I look fat now because I had ruptured appendix surgery, so not everyone fat just from food. No, I'm not like, okay, war skull. I mean, I agree, and I don't mean to be like, accusatory of anybody who's overweight as being like, some pig or something that can't control it. That's not the way I am at all. Like, I mean, to be honest with you, I love all people. I don't give, to be honest, I don't care what you do. um, or how you look. Like that's not something I necessarily judge. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, beautiful people are beautiful people, but it's just like I don't, I don't, I don't think about somebody being overweight as something that I judge as like, oh man, you don't know how to take care of your finances. You don't know how to do it. Like that's not what happens. That's not what I'm saying. And that's really where I'm not trying to defend myself on this. I just want to make it clear that I was generally speaking, when you look out there in society and you go down the streets and you look at people who are having a hard time getting out of their car, right? And you have other people who are like, looking for an escalator because they can't use the stairs. And you see this, happening, throughout society. Now, I see it all the time, but then again, I'm also kind of finding myself more in a retirement community where there's definitely an aging population. So, yeah, you're probably going to find people who are going to have trouble using the stairs and people who are going to be, you know, having trouble getting out of their cars and stuff like that. I mean, I'm in the hospital district, so people are not doing well when they get here, right? So it's like I can be reasonable with the idea of it, but generally speaking, that's the way it is, right? If you take care of your finances, you're going to take care of yourself and your health, and, for the most part. Besides, and then you have money for to go to the gym, right? All right, let's go check out the super chat. See what maybe we could change the conversation around. Okay, keep up the great vid, Simon. Much love from the Unbearables. Peter Brodison. Well, thank you so much for the $4.99, man. I really appreciate it. I was asking, would you consider doing more content on the need for skilled tradesmen in the U.S. or for free, affordable trade schools? Well, what would it do? Like, I mean, I could understand, like, maybe for building a house, but if you train a bunch of people to, okay, well, let's just give it a really general kind of idea. If we train people to manufacture stuff, right? And it's just like, hey, if we take everybody and we send them to school, and now you guys are really good at manufacturing, you all became electricians, tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, engineers, whatever it takes, right, to become manufacturers of stuff. And we send all these people to trade school. It doesn't lower the standard of living that they are going to demand, and that they will not be able to compete with. Right? So now what you have is you have a whole bunch of people who won't be able to compete with the foreign manufacturers. You see, so it's not going to work, right? It's like, okay, so I think Cantillon actually describes it with sailing. Like if you had a situation in which a nation was going to increase their navigation uh, portion of their trade, right? So they're going to become better at distributing through their shipping and navigation through seas and through ocean, whatever, right? Shipping. And so they send a bunch of people off to become naval experts, right? So they become really good at like being able to sail all over the place, and they come back only to find that the other people that they are going to be competing with have also done something similar to the nature. Now, all these people have a job or have a skill that they can't use, right? Or even if they didn't, it's like so many of these people come back, you'll have like a situation much like we experienced here with like college degrees. Like all of a sudden people have college degrees that they're not using. It would be something very similar. All of a sudden these people come back with this naval experience, but they really don't have a demand or need for it because they can't fulfill there's too many of them that is needed for the job, right? So that's what we would experience here in the United States. is that if you go and train a bunch of people to do this, to manufacture stuff, we don't have the facilities to manufacture from. Like, they do have some facilities they're building, and I shouldn't say that they don't do it. They do it. Like, you can find all kinds of stuff here that they manufacture in the United States. In fact, we produce a lot of stuff, right? We're manufacturing in all kinds of ways. The point being is that we don't manufacture on a scale that we export to the level of stuff that we import, and that's what makes the difference, right? We can have like really good things that we produce. We can produce all kinds of weaponry or jets or technology or something that's really awesome that nobody else in the world can quite do like we do. But it doesn't matter because we don't produce enough of that stuff comparatively to the amount of foreign production that we buy. And give it time, and the foreign producers will do it just as good, if not better, than we do. And that's another thing that we experience on a fairly regular basis as we find things like, all the technology fighting with China that's going on right now. It's it's sad to think, because like I know everybody wants to look for like a helpful answer. Like, I know everybody wants to figure it out. Like, they want to be able to just say, hey, we can have a game plan in which that we can be successful in the outcome of everybody being able to maintain the standard of living and have future generations also be able to acquire at least this sort of level of standard of living and be able to do that indefinitely. There's no economic model that has that. There's like, I don't care what you say as far as there's all this stuff that you could do with MMT or UBI or all this other stuff. There's no economic model out there that ever shows that that is lasting or a reasonable form of economic system that we should even try and attempt to do, right? Like, the only thing that we should really understand when it comes to the economy is to understand that there's economic forces out there that are always at play. And that's the important thing that in my opinion to understand, right? Is that these economic forces of why manufacturing is leaving, like, we can blame it on all kinds of stuff, but to really understand it for what it is, right? To understand that it's our standard of living that has done it, and that our demand for the foreign production out there to maintain this higher standard of living because we love the luxurious lives, we love our luxurious life, is the reason that it's all the problem. See, I mean, I say this in every video. Like, I don't know, like, I mean, I guess the more I repeat it, the more it makes sense to me, the more I internalized it, but it's like, I can't figure out how it is that with somebody who can piece all these puzzles together and stuff to figure out what it is that's going on with monetary policy and clue it into old school research from essays and try to piece it all together to what we have going on today and say to you, there is no fixing this. It can't. It's like trying to say, hey, this beautiful sunflower, man, don't let it die. You can't, right? The sunflower has an existence. That's it. It's going to grow. It's going to turn into this wonderful thing. You can experience it while it's there. But eventually, no matter what you do, you will never stop it from eventually falling over. And the United States economy is no different. All economies are that way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, whose it is or where it is. You have an industrious people who rise, produce and save, increase their standard of living, start moving into foreign production. From a rise of standard of living, your domestic manufacturing is going to leave. We are experiencing that now. Like, just look down in the art, look in the description. Right? And so what are you going to do? I mean, like, to me, you have to think, okay, there's only three things that you can do, right? You can either be the prince. I don't know how you're going to do that. Like, I guess you better be pretty. I don't know. Like, you got to be the prince, right? Or get to know the prince really well, right? Whoever the hell that is. You got to be the property owner, or you got to be the capitalist who invest into that system. So you really only have two choices. That's it. Now, you can fight it and you can say, oh no, all these rich people should really behave and not be greedy and they should really support my way of life. Okay, that's great. You can go fight that battle. I'm going to go over here and try and become a capitalist myself, right? Like that's the only thing I can do. Because the idea of owning this house is pretty much far-fetched. Now, I do have an idea on a 10-year plan that at some point I might rent this thing out. But at this point, like, if I live in it forever, I'll never really truly own it. I mean, I'm 47 years old. Like, I mean, even by the time I pay it off, it's going to be like, okay, great, now what? And like, I'm an old man, who cares, right? So, understanding on that sort of level is just like either you're going to be the property owner who figures out how do you get into rental properties or figures out how it is that you can house hack into them, how you invest through real estate investment trusts, how you team up with other people, how you figure out to become a property owner one way or the other. That's what your mind should be moving towards. That's what you should be thinking about. Or the capitalist who invests into that system. Now, whether that's through stocks and bonds and investment into businesses or whatever it is that's going on out there, you have to be somebody who's putting money somewhere to get a return on that money, and how you do that is up to you. It's a game out there where there's a billion different ideas that you can do that with, and people are very unique in when it comes to how it is that they take their money and turn it into more money. That's capitalism at its finest. So you can be one of those two things. If you are that, then you are probably going to be just fine. No matter what is going on within the economy, you will be at least somewhat nimble enough to then adjust what it is that you have going on. But you have to be focused in that fashion. You know, people who are killing it during downturns are blamed. Why? Like, I mean, that's like the opportunity of all opportunities. It's very short-lived, and you usually have the greatest opportunity to have the most movement. And yet people get very upset and angry over this, and I just don't get it. It's just like that's the opportunity that most of us will never really take advantage of. And it only comes a few times, right? And so not being prepared for those moments is like, yeah, it's just like you're gonna see it pass you by, and then yeah, of course you'd be mad and blame people and blame politicians and everything else for it. But it's better to understand it for what's really happening, for understand it from the economic forces that are at play, and that way you don't have to blame anybody. You actually have logical reason for why it's taking place. All right, I just saw that my fuzzy dice arrived on the porch in the mail. Thanks for the inspiration. Well, right on, Lee. I'm glad you got some fuzzy dice to hang. All right, I was asking, would you consider doing more content on the need for skilled trades? Oh, we already did that one. That's what I just talked about. Okay. Gosh, excuse me. All right. Peter shifted a video on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras, and the degrees were impressive, but they were bouncers and servers, bartenders. Of course, that's because everybody has gone off and got a degree. Like everybody. Like I know so many people who have gotten a degree, and what I find interesting about it is just like I ask them, it's like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm ring up groceries at the grocery market. Oh, I do like just like bartender, like whatever. They just like they have degrees but they don't do anything with them, and I'm like, well, what was the point of getting the degree? And they're like, well, if you don't get a degree, then you're not going to amount to anything. And it was just like, so what are you doing? It was just like, I mean, just because you have the degree, now you're somebody, even though you're still tending bar or ringing up groceries. Like, I don't get it. Like, man, the mosquitoes are just coming in here like crazy. There we go. So, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what was the point of the degree. But everybody went and got one because they were told that if they don't get a degree, they're not going to be, making any kind of real money in their life, or that they're going to be a failure or something like that. So they were scared into getting this degree. Now they're stuck with the student debt, and they don't use the degree for anything. And I'm like, I'm not saying like everybody doesn't, but like I know a lot of people who have degrees who don't use them for anything. And I thought, dang, man, if I went through all the effort of getting something like that, I would be using that. Like, I use my understanding of economics in the best fashion I can. I think I do fairly well with coming out here on YouTube and, presenting some information and having a discussion with it, trying to entertain for a little while, and I think I do pretty good at that. But somebody who went and paid a bunch of money to earn, to take classes, to spend time, earn that degree, and then not use it, it's like, wow, man, talk about a piss poor investment. And I've done bad investments before. I get it, it's a bad investment. All right, let's see here. And how much do we manufacture from homegrown components? Well, that's just the thing. It doesn't, at the end, it doesn't really matter. It's all a dollar number, right? Like, it's a trade imbalance that we have. We import far more in dollar amount than we export. And now part of that is Triffin's dilemma anyway. Like, how do we get the money out there to the rest of the world? You buy their stuff, right? If you buy their stuff, you export dollars. And that's ultimately what we do every time we're buying the foreign production, when we're buying those cars, when we're buying those TVs, when we're buying the cell phones, when we're buying all the stuff that we like. All right. Trades that are service oriented are more recession resistant. For example, plumbers, HVAC, and other repair jobs. Yeah. And now, when I say that, I don't mean to knock trade jobs. I think it was the idea of using that to try and bring manufacturing back to the United States. And I don't think that's going to be like anything that's going to be a realm of possibilities. However, with that being said, when it comes to like building, I think building is something that is a forever job. Now, whether or not generally it's a feast or famine kind of thing, but there's never been a time in history, ever, in the history of man, in which that they were not trying to put some sort of dwelling together, right? That's what humans do. We build stuff. And there's no reason to think that that won't go into the future. So getting into the trades is not a bad deal, knowing that is the case for all of history, and I'm sure will be all of the future. Will be that humans will continue to try and build things, and they will need electricians, they will need plumbers, they will need HVAC, they will need all the stuff that it takes in order to put buildings together. Now, whether or not it's a good time to be in that trade, or if you're in the right location, or if you have the right skills to compete against the other people who are out there, again, that's your economy, right? That's all in your economy. I got a degree. It's a money grab. Yeah. All right, let's cruise. Let's see where we are here. I know a lot of people who don't use their degrees. It's ridiculous. All right. I'm actually getting a degree, but it's in engineering. Uh, yep, so many people in school for stupid reasons. Most of their parents and friends push them to go. Yeah, it's kind of sad. I know a lot of people who are pushed to go. Simon, telling it straight about student loans. You know what, guys? I'm gonna have to go get my keys. Wait, do I have keys in here? I'm gonna have to go get my keys and roll up my window some because these mosquitoes are rolling in. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. You guys are way cool, thank you. But these bugs are flying in towards, you know, like any other bug's life. See them? They're like flying everywhere. There we go. Alright. Okay. Thanks for hanging out. You guys are way cool. What did I do with my glasses? Now I lost those. Did I take them? Yeah, that's okay. There we go. We can use those. Yeah. All right. College is overrated. Did I turn that off? Let me turn that off. College is overrated. I should have just worked for Costco straight out of high school. Why go to college and earn less after graduating? Yeah, well, that was me. Like, I graduated high school and I had absolutely zero intentions on going to college because I sucked at school. Like, I didn't like anything about sitting in class, going to school, doing the work, none of that stuff. And when they were like, hey, do you want to go to college? And I'm like, yeah, no thanks, right? I am not going to, I can't wait to get out of this classroom. I'm driving forklift, I'm doing, whatever for this lumber yard. I got that in mind. That's what I'm going to go do. And so I just bailed out and just did that. And I mean, it's not like it turned out very well for me. I mean, I was 40 years old, completely broke, in debt, had no car, drunk. It was I didn't say take my life and went and did something awesome with it. It wasn't until I started this YouTube channel that I really was actually turning my life around. I quit drinking. A few years later, I started the YouTube channel, kept pushing out videos, kept trying to, learn more about it. And, that's what really, carried me up to the next level. But it was most of my life, I just drove forklift or put houses together. That's all I was doing. And it doesn't take really any kind of, it doesn't take that much to learn how to drive a forklift, and it doesn't really take that much to learn how to build a house. I mean, it is kind of complicated, but, after you put a few of them together, it's not that hard. They kind of all go together the same way once you understand the prints. All right. All right, let me cruise down here. Gosh, there are so many members to the channel. Thank you, everybody who is now a member to the channel. I mean, that Grand Roofing Incorporated, I couldn't believe it when I looked at my stats this morning and had 700 and, I don't know, it was 763 members to the channel this morning. It was just incredible. So I'm really looking forward to growing that thing even more and getting it to 1,000. Excuse me. I went to the river yesterday. There were 4 or 5 mosquitoes on each leg within seconds during the day. It was insane. Yeah. What up, UE? Hey, what up, Larry Bird? 80 degrees in North Carolina. Oh, man. I'm using my grad degree, but feel intermediate about going back for licensure to start start a private proactive at a public university. Any thoughts? I mean, here's the thing. I wouldn't give my ideas about what's going on to dictate what it is that you need in your life, man. I mean, if you have this passion, if you have a dream, if you have an idea that you want to put into the future for your life, I would say go for it, man. I mean, what do I know? I'm just the uneducated economist out here. But when I look at a lot of people, like my friend who was helping me with this channel, she had to say, hey, I can't do it anymore. I'm going back to school because I want to go and get a better thing in life going on. And so that's what she ended up doing. She actually moved to North Carolina. And so people do it and they do it all the time. And so going off and trying to get something that's going to better your life, ultimately those higher paying jobs, sometimes in order to get them, you're going to need a degree, right? They just won't even look at you if you don't have it. And so it's going to be very difficult to try and get into some of those higher paying jobs if you don't have the degree, but you better be pretty well adamant and, planning on doing that, not just getting it and saying, I went and got the degree, but that's not what I really want to do. I want to sit here and ring groceries up, it's just that, that doesn't make any sense, College has great purpose, but unfortunately too many people thought going to college equated to high pay, jobs regardless of what type of degree. Yeah, and I really agree with that. And that was the bummer part about it, right? Is that a lot of people had the same expectations that once they got the degree that they would just like automatically just be handed this high paying job that they could not even have to really try for. And that's the unfortunate consequence of like even being in the United States now, is that most people don't realize that competition is good. But when you and all your friends are doing the exact same thing, then not all of you are going to be able to like beat the bear, right? Like, I mean, you've got to be able to have something that gives you outstanding, that has you outstanding from the rest. And that's where like somebody who would go and get a degree would be able to stand out. They were like, no, I worked all these summer jobs. I went and got this degree. Now I have a higher paying job. And now and it's awesome because of that. Now, you don't need a degree to start a business, right? You don't need a degree to invest. You don't need a degree to buy rental properties. You don't need a degree to be anything that makes you fabulously wealthy. In fact, all the things that I know of, as far as people who I know that made it really wealthy, I don't think you need a degree for any of it. Like, in fact, I think getting a degree was probably more harmful than helpful in pursuing some of the things that would make these people fabulously rich, And I really honestly believe that, because the pursuit of the degree and then going and getting the career and doing all that other stuff then denies you the opportunity to go and pursue things that are actually grand, like huge. Yeah, sure, you might be able to work real hard and start a medical practice and have a fairly successful medical practice, but think about the time and effort and energy and everything that goes into it in order to acquire that sort of thing, when the capitalist is just throwing money at particular investments that are then cash flowing right back to them, and they make it look seem so simple and easy, and they don't even really have to try that hard at it. So yeah, I mean, both of them are great ways to go. You can end up with a great life at the end of it, I'm sure. But one of them is very stressful packed. It's got, a lot of expectations from other people on you. You have a lot of responsibilities inside of it to try and, make sure that your practice is providing good, care for other people out there. If you're the capitalist, hell, I mean, I don't smoke or drink or anything like that, but I invest in Altria, right? I mean, it's like a sin stock, tobacco and whatnot. I mean, but it was just like, I know I look out there every day, I see people smoking cigarettes. And I mean, it was just like, wow, people still smoke cigarettes? Like, I thought Generation X was going to kill that stuff. Like, I thought for sure they were going to end it with those guys. Because, like, really, like, we were smokers big time. But it was really like, I mean, a lot of us were quitting. We were like, hey, man, this is bad deal. Right. But then I see all these younger kids, they smoke cigarettes. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I thought for sure. I mean, it's not nearly as many as there once was, I'm sure, but I didn't think that anybody would be smoking by now. I did. Like, I thought, man, give it 20 something years and there'll be nobody smoking. I was so wrong about that. That's why I invest in Ultra. It's like I had to change my tune. It was just like, man, I was wrong. Little like you know, you could show kids black lungs from now on, every single day, from the day that they were born till the day that they're 18, they'll run out there and buy a pack of smokes. Or 21 or whatever. I think, what is it? You got to be 21 now to buy smokes, I think. Anyway. I was going to buy some of these. What? Oh. Some of these Jews members? Huh. All right. Let's see here. We got Thomas. Thank you very much for the $5. I fix trains for the MSTA in Boston. Great union job with the pension, making 175K. Wow, that's pretty good. With overtime, and my young guys are interested in working here. Overtime, but not many young guys. Okay. Not many guys interested in working here. Well, that's too bad. I mean, hell, that seems like a really good job. Yeah, I would be down for something like that. Well, I would have been down for something like that. Not anymore. I'm 47. I don't care. I like doing my YouTube. I like doing YouTube, and I like working at the lumber yard. I like ringing up people and doing lumber sales and doing all that other stuff. I mean, I do enjoy it. It's not like, I mean, it's not like awesome. Hey, man, every single day is a super awesome day that I get to go and just like, like dance and scream how awesome it is. I mean, it's just a regular job, just like anything else, but it's cool. It gives me something to do, and it pays the bills, and it gives me time to do this YouTube stuff, and it gives me a lot of insight into the lumber industry. So for me, it's like it works out pretty well. I like it. All right, Austin, thank you so much for the $10. Went to college, then went into a field that didn't need college because it paid way more. Skills for new job learned on online books. College is becoming a debt trap. Also support for content. Oh, thank you so much, man. Very much appreciate that, Austin. Thank you so much for that $10. And yeah, that's really what people are starting to discover now, and that's the thing. Like there was a time when it was awesome. Like if you take the people's advice who were giving it about college, were pretty accurate about it. They're like, "Hey man, my experience it went down like this." And so the people listen to that and they're like, "Well, hell, our old elders are saying like if you go and get this college degree, you're going to earn a bunch of money from it because that's what happened for them." Which it did happen for them. But it doesn't happen for these guys because once everybody has it, then there was just a flood of degrees, and then the degree isn't special anymore. Actually, experience becomes special. And that's what I find, very amusing about like even working with people who have degrees. It was just like, so like here we are. I barely graduated high school. You have a degree. We both do the same job. In fact, I do my job pretty good. At least in my opinion, I think I do good. I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I guess everybody feels like they do their job well. But I find that kind of amusing. I didn't go and get a college degree. I had to go and drive forklift for 15, 20 years, All right. Public schools never teach kids about unions or labor issues. Teachers spend too much time talking about gender studies and mindless abortion topics. Yeah. All right. In The Strangest Secret, Nightingale defines success and man. He was on point. Super oversaturated. Can you expand upon the soft recession or hidden recession? I have a hard time believing that the stock market won't correct tremendously. Okay. All right. So, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit since people really kind of like this idea or this theory. So, you kind of have to take this back towards the pandemic, during the pandemic, and that the recession or the bailing out of the recession that was taking place was a pre-bailing out of what we would currently expect to be recessionary pressures going into the economy. Okay, so now let's think about two things real quick before we get started on this theory. What are the worst things about a recession? Right? People lose their jobs and the corporations get bailed out. That's like the two biggest issues. Like if those two things didn't happen, nobody would probably even care. But if you lose your job and then all of a sudden corporations are getting bailed out, people lose their mind. They get really mad about this. And then you have to have a really like charismatic president like Obama coming out there, open his mouth and have doves fly out so that everybody will be very accepting of the situation. All right. I take it. Okay. Let's let's talk about it. So, if you have a situation in which that unemployment rises and corporations get bailed out and people are going to get pissed, how do you prevent that from taking place? Right? Well, here we had the quickest, deepest recession in history during the pandemic, right? The lockdowns, shutdowns, everybody was told to stay home, right? No, all the social distancing, all that other stuff created this recessionary pressure, right? So then the government and the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, everybody stepped up, right, and did their part. What happened was a huge bailing out of the corporations, and something very interesting took place for unemployment. So let's start with the corporations for just a second, right? Because actually, let's talk about the unemployment for just a second. The unemployment had hit historically low, right? There was more jobs than anybody could ever possibly have imagined. Remember this? This was just right after the pandemic. There was like nobody could work at McDonald's. There was nobody to work at the fast food, no service industry jobs. Everybody was getting these jobs working for these corporations and stuff. Okay, let's back it up just a little bit. During the pandemic, there was something that was called a special purpose vehicle that was established. Now, this special purpose vehicle, it's called a corporate debt lending facility. Now, this corporate debt lending facility could only exist in unusual and exigent circumstances. This is the Fed clause of 13.3 or something of that nature. I can't remember exactly what it was. Anyway, this gives them the ability, in conjunction with the Treasury, to set up this special purpose vehicle, this entity that is separated from the Fed, separated from the Treasury. It's its own entity. And they said, we are going to fund this thing with hundreds of billions of dollars, and we are going to be buying corporate debt. Man. And people lost their mind. And now I was one of the people out here on YouTube saying the Fed is going to be picking winners and losers if they're going to be buying the corporate debt. Basically, they get to pick whoever they're going to say, you get funding, but unfortunately you suffer the consequences, because the special purpose vehicle can now buy pretty much unlimited amounts. Well, not unlimited, it had hundreds of billions of dollars, but an insane amount of whatever corporation that they deemed fit, right? Now, this news spread like wildfire throughout the mainstream media. And again, I was one of them who was spreading this propaganda, not understanding quite at the time what was taking place, except that the Fed was saying, hey, we're going to be buying corporate debt through this special purpose vehicle. Now, funny enough, that news, that propaganda that was spun out, that I admit was part of, actually got the market to start buying into the corporate debt before the Federal Reserve even established the facility. Just the announcement of them doing it seemed to have these corporations get the funding that they were looking for. Think about that for just a second. The Federal Reserve was saying that they were going to be buying hundreds of billions of dollars of corporate debt. The yields at the time from the quantitative easing had driven interest rates very low. The idea that the markets had a willing participant like the Federal Reserve then had them with a lot of confidence to go into the corporate debt market and started gorging on corporate debt, knowing that they would have an outlet for it, the Federal Reserve, through the special purpose vehicle. Because they were gorging on this incredibly cheap debt, all these corporations all of a sudden found themselves on a bunch of funding. What happens when you have a bunch of funding? You're going to start buying equipment, buying more buildings, hiring a lot of people, right? And so now all of a sudden you had unemployment hit the incredibly low, historically low levels, and jobs were disappearing like crazy. Not jobs, employees, right? The people who were working these jobs were disappearing. Where did they go, right? All of a sudden they're like staying at home because they're scared, or they're taking these jobs over at these high-level corporations who all of a sudden just found themselves in a ton of funding through this effort of pushing this idea of a special purpose vehicle buying corporate debt. So now the corporations are sitting on a ton of cash, and you're coming off of historically low unemployment numbers. So you think about it, this was the pre-bailing out of the recession. Now you can go into a recession and what would typically have high unemployment numbers occurring, have just kind of mediocre unemployment numbers occurring. Why? Because we came off of this unbelievably historically low unemployment where all the people, all the employees had just disappeared. As they lost their jobs over at the high level CEO corporations, zombie corporations, they started taking jobs flipping burgers and serving beers. All right. And so they're still working. They're not counting as unemployed yet, right? So they went from, right, again, this would typically cause the unemployment to rise, but we're not experiencing that because, again, it was bailed out, right? So all these jobs that are disappearing from the zombie corporations are just finding their way over to the service industries. And again, eventually we will see unemployment rise, but typically at this time you would see unemployment rising significantly higher than what we were experiencing. But since it was pre-bailed out and all these people had these jobs that they probably shouldn't at these zombie corporations who got funding through these special purpose vehicles that didn't actually buy any of it, but the market did buy into the corporate debts, believing that the special purpose vehicle was going to buy into it, and that was all part of the credible threat theory coming from the Federal Reserve to begin with. I'm the only one who explains that, by the way. I'm the only one. There's nobody else out there who is going to explain that to you. And I have proof from the Federal Reserve that's exactly what was the case. I got it right here on my computer, and I can't remember. I think it was Christopher Waller who said it. So, I don't know. Did I miss anything? Yeah. And so now, like I said, we can go into this next recession and not have the experience of needing to bail out the corporations, right? The malinvestments, the zombie corporations are allowed to fail. The good corporations, the viable ones, are sitting on a bunch of cash to get them through the system so they can keep making their debt payments to get them through this time. So, as far as I'm concerned, like that's exactly what they did, is they pre-bailed out the recession. And I've been saying that for a long time. The recessionless recession, right, is what I called it. And I've had that exact theory for years now. Okay. I drove a forklift too. Forklift gang, yeah. I enjoyed driving the forklift. It was a lot of fun. 207 people watching. I'm really, it's cool to see. We got 207 people watching with 151 likes, $20 in super chats. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Flipping it and churning it. Chills. Appreciate the explanation. Interesting take. Yeah, thank you. But it's like, what I find interesting about that theory is that it's not even like really a theory. Okay, that's the history of it. That's what happened, right? And now I find it funny how those who tell history are the ones who write the history, are the ones who tell it, whatever. I mean, the ones who tell it are the ones who write it. I documented it here on this channel. So like, I know the things that I just told you, I have proof of it. There is documentation somewhere out there in the internet, or I have it in my computer, or it's linked in those videos that I have put out there. The Federal Reserve was well aware of that whole thing. Like, I mean, once I was picking up on it as it was unfolding, I started putting the pieces together, and it was just like, boom, okay, I think I got this. And that's when I came up with the recessionless recession theory. I put it out there, and sure enough, it seems to be playing out now. But again, it didn't play out to the point that it was acknowledged. All right. See, like, we recognize it, we know it. Those who are following me on my channel, when I was talking about the recessionless recession and what to expect from it, we are seeing it right now, right? And so even as time goes on, like, you think about it, how is it, like, what could you do? What could you do to have an effect on the economy that was the same as lowering interest rates? Like, what is it that you could do if you were the Federal Reserve that could have the same impact as lowering interest rates and not use credible threats, right? And not use the credible threat. Like, if there was a way that you could have the inflation expectation remain elevated and the Federal Reserve was to just remain silent, like, and just let people believe whatever it is that's going on right now, just continue to believe it, and the Fed didn't have a bunch of, BS that they were blabbering out there to the mainstream media. If the inflation expectation was to continue to rise, it would pull the neutral interest rate ever higher, making the Fed funds less restrictive on the economy. That would be somewhat similar to lowering interest rate if the neutral interest rate was to have stayed still. All right. So as long as time goes on and inflation expectation remains elevated, we could find less restrictive economy from the rising neutral interest rate going into the future. And again, that would be like an attempt to push off recessionary pressures. We wouldn't have to lower interest rates. All we have to do is keep inflation expectation elevated and raise the neutral interest rate, and that will have an impact on the economy that would be less restrictive, which is just crazy to think that the rising neutral interest rate would be a monetary, like, not necessarily stimulating effect, but less restrictive effect by having a higher neutral interest rate expectation or having a higher inflation expectation. Oh, good Lord, guys. All right. The Fed has played God with money policy for so long. They are almost out of tricks. We need some type of reset value to keep this fiat game going. Yeah. We need some type of reset of value to keep the fiat game going. I don't know. I think really, like we were talking earlier, in today's video that we did earlier that was so rudely cut off by the internet access. But I think it's really going to move into a stable coin, and most people probably won't even notice that there was a shift in change in type of currency that they use. Like, they'll just continue to use their debit cards and their bank accounts and not realize that, a lot of the transactions that they're doing is being done in stable coins. And I really honestly think that's going to be the move that the whole system goes towards. And the only reason why I say that is because, the Federal Reserve is talking so much about it. How long are we into this? An hour and 16 minutes. All right. If stocks go up, doesn't the value of the DCY go down? It's currently at 104.86. Yeah, but I think that I think typically, yes, you would say that. Like, you would also say that, you would also say that kind of about gold as well, right? So, like, those two would be inverse to each other. If gold goes down, dollar goes up. If dollar goes down, gold goes up. But what we've actually seen take place is that these two can rise together, right? And it is not unheard of for it to rise together, because it was something that Brent Johnson had predicted a long time ago with the dollar milkshake theory. And that as people start to freak out about economic downturns or just problems altogether, what will end up happening is that they will run to safety. And typically they would run to the dollar, but now the dollar has this really bad name, so they're not going to run to the dollar like they once had. And since there's really nothing else to go to, they're going to end up running to gold. And so if you have a bunch of people running to gold and a bunch of people running to the dollar, you can actually see these two rise together. So it's not, I don't think it would be unheard of to see the dollar rise and the stock market rise and gold rise and all these things to rise together at the same time, which would be very, like, backwards thinking from what the way you would normally think the dollar rising and, like, things like gold falling, right? But really, if there is that much fear out there and nobody knows exactly where to go, people could be getting into as much cash as they're trying to get out of cash, right? Because a lot of people still believe that cash is trash and that it doesn't have any kind of real usefulness, and that, you should be in gold and silver or whatever. I mean, silver is starting to make its run. It's up to what, $31 an ounce. That's pretty decent. It's still a long ways from its all-time highs, but still, I mean, it's pretty exciting to watch it move up, especially considering that it was in the teens just a few years ago. So, watching the silver play move is pretty good. The uninverted yield curve I believe, is going to really drive a lot of the speculation into these precious metals. A lot of times people are going to get concerned about what it is that where the bond market is going to go to. And if you have any place that you are going to speculate, you're going to speculate inside of the gold market and silver market. The bond market is not typically a speculation kind of move. It's more of a fixed asset move. So when you have yields that are driven really high by prices falling, and you have a concern in the future about whether or not the Federal Reserve is going to be hiking rates or cutting rates, or maybe have no idea of what's happening altogether, that might again start pushing you towards the safe haven asset that is not subject to this, what the hell are they going to do going into the future, and you can get out of that third party claim. And a lot of people are starting to recognize that out of the gold and silver. And so I could imagine that as the yield curve uninverts and we start finding where people are very concerned about what's going to be taking place within the bond market and having liquidity within the bond market, they're going to go to that place that is out of that third party claim, and you will find a fairly decent rally taking place within the precious metals market. Now again, that's just me kind of talking out loud. I'm not trying to give any kind of financial advice, but that's kind of what happened in 2011, right? And I'm not trying to say that's exactly how it went down, but it was something similar ish. And none of this stuff is exactly the same, but it kind of rhymes at times. So, I can imagine that. I wouldn't be surprised to see silver get to its all-time high again. And considering the amount of demand coming from like the solar panels and all that industrial use, I wouldn't be surprised to find where it would blow off that all-time top and just, rally up to something that's like, double that, run up to $100 an ounce or something. Would not surprise me one little bit to see something like that take place. Alrighty. What time is it? It is 10:30. Alrighty. 198 people watching with 165 likes. I'm overwhelming you with content today. Actually, every day, don't I? Duped by the Jekyll. Interesting. Totally agree. All right. Let me see here. So essentially, the DXY could potentially go lower, which is huge because dollar power is low, and you offset that by a safe haven asset. So when cars and houses crash, you will be in good position to buy. Yeah, and I don't know, like, a lot of people have like, this belief that, see, it was so funny, like, I don't know, what was it? 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I'm reading like a Time magazine or something, and it's talking about the everything bubble, and it's about ready to pop, and that was years ago, right? And everybody talks about this crash like it's an inevitable thing that has to happen. Like there's no way that house prices could stay elevated because nobody can afford them. But yet, like every single day, they stay elevated, right? There's no crash taking place. Interest rates being elevated, if they continue to go up, I mean, I think about it, the mortgage market found its level right away. And now it does fluctuate a bit off of the expectation of interest rate cuts going into the future. So if there's like a significant belief that there's going to be rate cuts, then that actually starts to impact the mortgage market in a significant way. And we saw that happening at the end of last year and moving into the early parts of this year, coming from that, that idea that the Fed was going to be cutting rates. But the mortgage market itself, it found its level right away. When the Fed said we are going to be raising rates, going fast and furiously with them, the mortgage market shot up almost right away. But the Fed kept raising rates. It didn't keep lockstep, right? I mean, it just boom, it shot right up, and then the Fed continued to do their increase in interest rate adjustments and kept raising them. But the mortgage rate, boom, it shot up, and it fairly just basically went steady the entire time. Well, what does that say? That the market participants for mortgages, for the mortgage-backed securities, the investors out there, the pension funds, the insurance companies, the people who buy into these mortgages, mortgage-backed securities, they looked at that price, they looked at that yield, and they said, hey, that's it, I'm in. And that's where they found it. Now, people say, well, what happens if the Federal Reserve goes to raise rates? What happens if they do? The mortgage market already found their rates, right? They did that earlier. They did that a while ago. And although they might, fluctuate some if the Federal Reserve was to raise rates, it's still like they found 8%, 7 to 8%, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I guess it got all the way down to, into the high sixes at some point. But if you consider that channel that they were in, they found that right away. The mortgage market did. As the Federal Reserve was raising rates, what if they kept raising rates? That they could have still remained at that same level the mortgage market did. I mean, it wasn't like they came down when the Fed stopped raising rates. They just stayed there. And so even if the Fed was to raise rates right now, I don't know if that would have a serious impact on the mortgage market, raising or lowering. Alrighty, guys. I'm thinking I'm going to call it quits. I'm starting to slur my words a little bit, so I must be really tired here. But it was a lot of fun hanging out with you guys this evening. We have a bunch of you hanging out with 192 of you watching and 170 likes with $19.99 in super chats. You guys are always so very generous with them super chats. Especially, yesterday with Grand Roof Incorporated. I mean, I just can't thank them enough. Totally hooked a bunch of you guys up with memberships, and I just I was just amazed when I saw it this morning when I looked at my stats. All right, the introverted Californian, when did that transaction occur? Oh, he must be talking to somebody. The housing prices are artificial because they weren't not artificial. The construction companies would be building like crazy. Listen, well, first of all, the building companies would be building like crazy and taking advantage of the high prices that are elevated right now if they knew that there was going to be a buyer. That's what's holding them back. Go and look at builder sentiment right now. I'm just going to talk about this and then we'll call it quits for the evening because I'm tired. But think about it like this. Go and look at builder sentiment right now. The thing has pretty much gone positive in every single category except for buyer traffic. Like the builder does not feel good about the buyer traffic and feeling that if they were to build a house today, would they be able to sell it upon completion? And this is really where the builder is most concerned. The prices are right, right? You got elevated home prices. You have lumber prices are right. They're cheap as hell. They're crashing, right? They're at $450 per thousand. You can't get cheaper lumber than if you wish for it, right? So here we got cheap lumber. Here we got expensive houses. This is like prime condition for the builder out there. What's the holdup, bro? What's the holdup, builder? Yeah, nobody's showing up to buy. That's my problem. That would be my problem, is that I'm worried about putting this thing together and then there being a buyer at the end of this. If we had more buyer traffic, I would be all over this game. That's what's holding them up. Okay, like you have to understand it in this fashion. I mean, other people might have other arguments for it. That's fine, right? They can have all the arguments they want. I see this game clearly. I know it well, right? I know it better than just about anybody out there. And in fact, I feel in a lot of ways I know it better than just about anybody else out there. Once you see that buyer traffic start to increase, like I forget where it was at, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but it was like in the high 30s. Like I'm going to say it was around 38, 39. You see it go up to 42. You see it go up to 48. It starts moving towards like, it's going to about ready to cross to 50. Get your lumber while you can. because as soon as it pops over to 50 and they turn positive on it, the game is on, and those builders are going to start ramping up production like you've never seen. All right? Because once the building sentiment has gone positive in all aspects of it, the prices are elevated, right? Think about it. Like this house right here, I bought this house a little over 2 years, 2.5 years ago. Right? I just checked again, the ZELLE estimate went up another $10,000. Right? It is sitting at about $80,000 more on the ZELLE estimate than what I had paid for it. I had also put like 10% down on the house. So right now, the amount of equity I have in this house is somewhere around $130,000. That happened in 2.5 years. It's insane to think. That is ridiculous. That is way, way too much. Even if I was to lose a bunch of that equity, I would have to lose so much of it in order for me to go underwater. Now I think about that. How many people are sitting in that same condition? The amount of homes that have been sold over the last 2 years is very small. Once the interest rates went up, very few mortgages were being written. And because very few mortgages were being written, that leaves very few homes out there in the market that could actually go underwater. In fact, the amount of homes that are underwater now is less than there was prior to the pandemic. Right? So, again, like, I don't see house prices coming down. I don't see them coming down, and I don't see where the builder is ramping up production, adding to the supply. Alrighty, guys. It was fun. I enjoyed hanging out, but like I said, I'm a bit tired. We're an hour and a half into it. Nice little fun live stream for us talking about the production here in the United States. And, one of the main production things that I feel is happening here in the United States or could happen is that home building, right? You think about it, it's a 100% domestic product. It's domestic labor, it's domestic supply. The product doesn't leave. It's right here for the United States, and everything stays local. So once that does ramp up, you can see where there would actually be a booming economy coming from the home building aspect within the United States being the one manufactured product that is 100% for American by American and will not ever leave America, right? So if we ever come in a situation in which we see that, I would think that there would be better economic times ahead. But considering that the builder is slow, lumber is slow, economy is slow, interest rates are elevated, nobody wants to build, nobody wants to buy, I can't imagine that creating for any kind of booming times. All right. So anyway, let me read a couple more just as we cruise out here. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Never get an adjustable rate loan unless you're a millionaire or something. Stick with the fixed rates. All right. People can't sell in California anymore. Average home prices are $1.5 million. Your annual tax bill is $2,000 per month. Oh, wow. That's incredible. Alrighty, guys. Oh, good times. Thank you much for being here. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.